Yo, what's going on, peeps? It's your boy Scene from SOUTH Entertainment, man, and we back in here with another episode of SOUTH Ent Reacts, man. And today we going to be discussing this whole Rick Ross catching a commercial flight situation that happened. You know what I mean? Some people saying, you know, if you really rich, what you doing on a commercial flight? You know what I mean? With the regulars, you know what I mean? Other people saying, you know, it's a small business move. You know what I'm saying? Me personally, I think that people are missing a bigger point, but I'm gonna get into that. You know, I'm gonna play some clips or whatever. I'm gonna come back, tell y'all what I think about them or whatever. So, man, we gonna get into it, man. So, here we go.
An amazing time. When I was leaving, that hoodie was low. Rose did it big, the boat. And coming from a boss, I gotta let you know how this go. When Ricky Rose take flights to 6 digits, I'm going to get some mounion, the mounion. But don't y'all ever look down on no young hustlers who, if they walking, if they riding a bicycle, if they riding on the train, don't you ever look down on no young hustlers going to get some money. Don't you ever talk about these young entrepreneurs if they was flying first class, coach, economy, or private. I flew that 20 years before I went and spent a 40 ball. And when I say that, I mean 40 million on the plane. But don't y'all ever talk down on no young hustlers that's going to get it. I don't care if you young hustlers driving Uber, Rose gonna salute you like a heavyweight.
Alright, this actually the part that I think I can agree with on the most. You know, a lot of people, you know, get caught up in looking rich instead of actually becoming rich or looking successful than actually becoming successful. You know what I mean? And I think that, you know, if you can find a way to protect your profit or to protect your bottom line, however that looks, you know what I mean? If that looks like flying commercial versus flying private, if that's going to protect your bottom line, if that's going to protect your profit, then I think that that's the move. You know what I mean? I think that's the move that, you know, you should be making. You know what I mean? And you know, not only if you know, on, you know, Rick Ross level or whatever, but even, you know, that goes for anybody that's just, you know, doing any side hustling. You know, if they, you know, door dashing, you know, doing Uber or whatever the case may be, you know, protecting that bottom line and protecting that profit is always the #1 goal. You know what I mean? So don't try to look rich. Try to actually get the money. You know what I mean? So that's that.
When they cut my grass, the lawn service, they make videos. That's 350 acres. It's Ricky Rose now. If you see me walking into a restaurant that sell 99-cent wings, you better say that's Ricky Rose. He's a hit. And since it's a big deal for Rose to fly commercial, sometimes I might have to buy me a wing at the Atlanta airport.
See, this why I think Ross started losing people, because the minute you started, you know, you start talking about acres and cars and houses and, you know, things of that nature right now, you start signing like you trying to convince people. You start signing kind of like you explaining yourself, you know what I mean? And I think, you know, the reality is that if you really worth what people, if you really worth what you say that you worth, then you ain't gotta explain yourself. You know what I mean? You know, everybody know that Ross got money. You know what I mean? You know, I think pretty much everybody know that. So, all, you know, talking about all of this acreage and all of that stuff like that. Kind of, you sound like you explaining yourself to people, and I really don't think you really need to.
Well, hey, you not flying private now. You supposed to be the biggest boss. Why are you flying amongst the regular people? That ain't really rich. That ain't what you really portray. That ain't boss behavior, but they not understanding and pushing, and they don't really care about logic in this moment, because I'm somebody that understand you're not supposed to fly private every time you go somewhere. If you're making a quick little trip, or you just going somewhere for a few hours or for one night, it don't always make sense to go fly for $20,000 or $40,000. That is the way that you go broke. But if they can tag you in it, joke on you, and they feel like they can get a reaction out of you and have you explain yourself, that's what they gonna go for. They go for all the elements in this game, whether it be rich, whether it be popping, balling, stunting, flying fancy. They put you on that status, and especially if you talk that heavy rich talk. Now, Ross explaining himself, what he could have just said was, hey, bro, I'm not ashamed of flying commercial at all. I'm a hustler. I'm a dude that's gonna make good business decisions. I can afford to always fly private, but it don't make sense at times.
Nah, I think Big Ant hit the nail on the head with this one. The rap game, it can create an image that can eventually be a prison, for some artists, because if you always talking about private jets, Maybachs, millions of dollars, and all of this extravagant stuff, and this high-end lifestyle, and all of this type of stuff like that, people gonna expect you to live that way every single day, you know what I mean? Especially on the internet, you know what I mean? Because the internet don't allow nuances, you know what I mean? So if people get used to you always coming online and you bragging about the finer things in life, as soon as trouble hit, and trouble will hit because it comes for everybody, you know what I mean? I don't really care how rich you is, you know what I mean? Things happen, and if it hit hard enough and you're not prepared, or even if maybe you are prepared with it, but if it makes you look crazy in the public eye, then it get harder to explain when you keep putting out one image and people get used to it, and then something happen. Now people looking at you crazy, you know what I mean? So and like that's my whole thing, with Ross. I don't think there's nothing wrong with flying private. I mean, not flying private, but with flying commercial or nothing like that. I don't think nothing wrong with that. But it's like you got this whole persona, the biggest boss, you know what I mean? So it's like people don't expect to see that, you know what I mean? Now granted, it is a good business move. I don't think it's nothing wrong with flying commercial or nothing like that. But for you, when you always talking when you talking a certain way all the time, that could be a problem, you know what I mean? When people see you flying commercial, you know what I mean? So, and another thing, it's crazy too, because the same people that are clowning Ross for flying commercial, they will be the same people that'll be clowning him if he fly private every single time he went somewhere and ended up going broke. They'll still be clowning it, you know what I mean? Now that's crazy, but that's how it goes.
They gon' jab at it. The more and more you talk, the more and more they gonna say, well, hey, bro, why don't you just own it directly? Hey, fam, I don't fly private every single where I go. I do have my own jet. I do have a bunch of money. I do got 350 acres of land. Y'all know I'm not broke. Y'all see my houses. Y'all see my cars. Y'all see my lifestyle, but they don't care about that on the internet. It's just they see that chink in your armor where they can have you on here explaining yourself. And once you do that, without just keeping it short and sweet, Like I said before, time and time again, they gonna hold you to that on this place. Because of the simple thing is, y'all, it's billionaires who gonna fly on commercial flights at times. Just keep it 100. You won't even know who they are. It's billionaires that'll ride by you in a regular car. But when you pop it, you put it on there, you a rapper, they see you stunting and shining and balling, and you stunting and shining and balling on other people, they gonna expect you to uphold that at all times. They don't care about you going broke.
See, people think rich equals reckless spending, and that couldn't be further from the truth. You know, most wealthy people stay wealthy because they are constantly evaluating what makes financial sense. You know what I mean? Because sometimes, you know, the best business move ain't gonna always be, you know, the flashiest. You know what I mean? And that could be true for, you know, somebody that's a billionaire, somebody that's, you know, just a small business owner, or, you know, somebody, you know, like me trying to, you know, build a YouTube channel. You know what I mean? Just like, you know, for example, like I'm trying to build this South Entertainment brand or whatever. You know, sometimes shit, I want the expensive camera, I want the expensive lights, you know, I want the expensive, you know, everything. But, you know, I have to evaluate, you know, if the cheaper option can get the job done for me right now while protecting, you know, my profit, then that's the move, sir, you know.
That I have to say in this whole explanation, he said, well, we got the situation going on with Carmelo Anthony right now. Why y'all focused on me? Why are we not talking about that? And I'm like, well, hold on now, Ross. You haven't talked about that either from what I have seen. So don't reference it now because the heat is on you. I just disagree with that part of it. But you fly commercial, I expect that. I'm somebody that's logical. I understand money and revenue.
And see, now I disagree with Ross on this one. You know, when people start talking about you and criticizing you, you know, you can't change the subject, sir. You know, you got to stand in there. You got to stand in that pocket. You got to stay on topic. You know, you got to still be the boss that you claim that you are. You know what I mean? If you gonna address it, address it. You know what I mean? Don't be pointing at other stuff that may be going on, talking about why y'all ain't talking about that, and you know why you know you talking about me. You know what I mean? That ain't how the internet works, sir. You know, if you on here and you popping off, you popping your shit, you popping your collar, and when somebody catch you lacking out in public and they bring it to the internet, the same place that you were when you were popping your collar and popping your shit, when they bring it to the same place and everybody start talking about that part, you, sir, cannot be talking about, well, why y'all ain't talking about Young Thug? I mean, I know he ain't say that, but I'm saying you can't be pointing fingers and talking, you know, talking about why people ain't talking about this and talking about that. Sir, we're talking about you. You know what I mean? So, nah, that's not gonna work. That ain't how that works. So, I think that this story ain't really about Rick Ross, per se, in my opinion. I think that it's more about image versus reality. You know, that's what I'm pulling out of this. You know what I mean? Because social media done convince people that success gotta look a certain way. You know what I mean? Sometimes success can look like a private jet sometimes. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes success look like sitting in first class and keeping $20,000-$30,000 in your pocket. You know what I mean? I think that the real flex is in options, having the options. You know what I mean? Creating the options for yourself. You know what I mean? I think that that's that's a bigger flex. You know what I'm saying? So you know, whether you building a business, you know what I'm saying, creating content, you know, driving trucks or whatever, you know what I mean, whatever it is that you doing to, you know, get the money, make sure that that's the focal point. Make sure that that's the goal, to actually get the money and make smart decisions with the money, and not to be trying to look a certain way to impress people on the internet that don't give a damn about you, that ain't gonna help you pay not one of your bills, you know what I mean? So that's my take on it, man. But you know, y'all let me know what y'all think about this whole situation, man. You know what I mean? Y'all get in the comments and, you know, y'all, you know, let me know, man. You know, and y'all keep tapping in with me, man. You know, I'm gonna keep trying to pump the content out, keep trying to get better at it, you know what I mean? And y'all tap in, man. SouthEntMusic.com, grab some merch, man. And yeah, man, we gonna keep it pushing, man. Until next time, peace.